A quiet Sunday morning. Daniel was clearing tables when he heard something crash hard. A young woman on crutches had just slipped and fallen, struggling to pick up her broken crutch under the curious stares of the entire cafe. Two teenagers whispered, "Look at that! Who'd hire someone on crutches like that?" The woman tried to hide her face, trembling as she spoke softly to Daniel when he came to help. "Please don't laugh at my crutches. I can't take one more pitying look." Suddenly, her phone rang. The screen lit up. Board of Directors, urgent. Daniel saw the name beneath. Evelyn Grant, CEO Heart Tech. The woman froze and her secret was exposed right there in the middle of the cafe. Daniel Hale was 36 years old, a single father working as a server and cleaner at a small neighborhood cafe. He had kind features, dark circles under his eyes from working multiple shifts, but he always managed to keep a gentle smile for customers. His wife had died 4 years ago from bone cancer. She'd used crutches for a long time before the end. Daniel was deeply sensitive to the dismissive looks people gave those who walked with support. He'd once been a photo editor and graphic designer at an agency, but he quit after his wife passed. He switched to manual labor, jobs with flexible hours so he could take care of his daughter. His daughter was Lily, 8 years old. She loved to draw, always carrying a small sketchbook. She'd draw pictures of her mother on crutches with wings on her back, calling her superhero mom. That morning, Lily sat in the corner of the cafe doing her art homework, occasionally looking at her father with pride in her eyes. When Evelyn fell and her crutch broke, Daniel immediately remembered the scene of his wife falling in a hospital corridor after someone pushed past her. The old pain made it impossible for him to just stand there. He helped Evelyn up, keeping his voice gentle so she wouldn't feel pitied. He only asked if her leg hurt badly, if she needed bandages or ice. Evelyn tried to appear cold, but her voice shook. That phrase, "Please, don't laugh at my crutches," made Daniel's throat tighten because it was exactly what his wife used to say. When the phone screen showed Board of Directors urgent and the name Evelyn Grant, CEO of Heart Tech, Daniel realized she wasn't just a woman who'd fallen. She was someone powerful who was crumbling. Evelyn turned off the phone like she'd been shocked, breathing heavily. Daniel didn't pry. He just said, "If you need somewhere quiet to breathe, you can sit in that corner. No one will bother you there." The authentic touch. Daniel quickly used tape, a wooden ruler and cloth to temporarily stabilize the broken crutch, exactly the way he used to do it for his wife. This detail made Evelyn look at him a second time, longer. Lily ran over innocently asking, "Is your leg hurt?" "My dad's really good at fixing crutches. He used to fix them for my mom all the time." The innocent words pulled old wounds into the light. Evelyn sat down, looking at the father and daughter through the bright sunlight streaming through the window. She felt like she was looking at a life she'd never had the chance to own. Normal, warm, and unjudged. Messages from the board kept coming. "If you don't appear at the emergency meeting at 9 a.m., we will proceed with a vote in absentia." "The lawyers are ready," creating crushing pressure, though outside the cafe was so peaceful. Daniel set a cup of hot cocoa on Evelyn's table, saying quietly, "Someone out there is trying to pull you out of your chair. But here, you're just someone who fell. Just breathe." Evelyn looked up at him. This stranger, this cafe worker, had seen through her armor in seconds. She noticed his calloused hands, the way he'd fixed her crutch without making her feel helpless. The daughter in the corner, drawing pictures with such focus and love. "How did you know?" she asked softly. "Know what?" "That I needed this, not advice, not solutions, just this." Daniel smiled sadly. "Because someone I loved needed the same thing once. And I wasn't always there for her the way I should have been." The weight of his words settled between them. Lily looked up from her drawing, then quietly brought it over to show Evelyn. It was a simple sketch, a woman on crutches with wings, standing tall with the sun behind her. "You remind me of my mom," Lily whispered. "She was strong too." Evelyn felt something break inside her chest, something cold and protected that hadn't moved in years. At 8:57, 3 more messages came through, each one more threatening than the last. Daniel glanced at the clock, then at Evelyn. "Whatever's out there can wait. You're safe here." But they both knew that wasn't true. At 8:59, the cafe door swung open. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story reaches. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Three people in expensive suits walked in. The energy shifted immediately. One was Reed, a board member of Tech. The other two were his assistants. They spotted Evelyn with her broken crutch, messy hair, no blazer, no makeup, sitting at a corner table. The image was completely opposite from the million-dollar CEO they were used to seeing. Reed smirked, speaking loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. I didn't expect to find our CEO hiding here. The board is meeting and you're sitting in a coffee shop, playing the victim with crutches? Several customers turned to look. Whispers started. Wait, is she really a CEO? Doesn't look like one at all. Evelyn gripped the edge of the table, trying to stand, but her left leg was trembling from the fall. The temporarily fixed crutch Daniel had made creaked, threatening to break again. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself slightly in front of Evelyn to block some of the stares, saying simply, "Keep your voice down, sir. This is a cafe, not a boardroom for humiliation." Reed turned to him with a mocking smile. "And who are you, some single dad server? You think she's going to protect you? She can't even protect herself." The humiliation escalated. Reed pulled out a tablet, opened it to show a financial report, speaking loudly. Our CEO secretly transferred $5 million into a private account, letting the board handle it merciful. Evelyn stammered, "That's not my signature." But her voice was weak. No one could hear clearly. Daniel glanced briefly at the screen. His trained eye immediately caught it. The signature had jagged edges, a clear sign of poor photo manipulation to anyone who'd worked in graphics. Instead of arguing, Daniel calmly asked, "Would you dare send me the original file via email? I'll zoom it in on the cafe's big screen so everyone can see it clearly." The cafe went silent. No one expected a server to make such a bold suggestion. Reed laughed loudly. "You think anyone here would trust a server to read financial reports?" But there was a flicker of discomfort on his face. A woman at a nearby table spoke up. "Actually, I'd like to see it. If everything's legitimate, what's the harm?" Another customer nodded. "Yeah, put it up on the screen." Reed's smile faltered. "This is confidential company information that you just showed the entire cafe," Daniel pointed out. "So it's not confidential anymore, is it?" Lily watched the scene unfold, clutching her stuffed rabbit, whispering to Evelyn, "I don't like how they're talking to you." A small emotional knife for the viewers. Reed was trapped. If he refused, he'd look guilty. If he agreed, he risked exposure. "Fine," Reed said, his voice tight. "But when this proves nothing, I'm reporting both of you for harassment." Daniel connected his tablet to the cafe's HDMI cable, projecting the screen onto the TV on the wall. The financial report appeared, enlarged for everyone to see. Daniel zoomed in on the signature section. The pixels became visible. The edges were clearly jagged. The ink color of the signature didn't match the rest of the document. A customer who was an accountant gasped. "Wait, that signature was digitally added." Another person leaned forward. "The resolution doesn't match. That's been edited." Reed's face went pale. "That's ridiculous. You can't tell that just by looking." Daniel opened the file properties showing the metadata. "This document was modified 3 days after you claim it was submitted to the board." The cafe erupted in murmurs. Evelyn stared at Daniel. He wasn't just some single dad serving coffee. He had skills, real skills. Reed tried to grab the tablet back. "Turn that off. You have no authority." Daniel held it steady. "If you have nothing to hide, let everyone see the whole thing." That's when Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Jonas, an old friend who now worked as a freelance cybersecurity consultant for Tech. Found the access logs. The person who edited the file was Reed. "Want me to send proof?" Daniel texted back one word: "Send." He opened the email Jonas sent, displaying the server access logs on screen. Reed's account had accessed and modified the file at 2:13 a.m., the second freeze moment. Daniel spoke slowly, clearly, each word deliberate. "You say the CEO embezzled funds, but the file accusing her was opened and edited by you at 2:13 in the morning. Why? The cafe went so quiet you could hear a spoon touch a saucer. One customer who'd been live streaming said into their phone, "Everyone, look at this. I think the board member is the one who's been lying." The stream started gaining viewers. Fast, Evelyn broke the silence, speaking for the first time with her real CEO voice firm and clear. "Mr. Reed, if you believe you are right, let the police review these logs with us." Reed's face went from pale to flushed. His voice turned threatening. "Who do you think they'll believe, you or me?" Daniel took half a step forward, standing straight, no longer in the posture of a humble server. "They don't need to believe anyone. They just need to believe the data." Reed's assistants exchanged nervous glances. One of them quietly stepped away from Reed, distancing himself. More customers pulled out their phones. The live stream viewer count was climbing. Reed realized he was losing control. "This is a setup. You two planned this." "Planned what?" Daniel asked calmly. "Planned for you to show a forged document in a public place? Planned for you to loudly accuse someone without evidence?" Lily stood up, walking over to stand next to her father. She looked up at Reed with the kind of honest judgment only a child can deliver. "My dad says lying is bad. Are you a liar?" The simplicity of it cut through everything. Outside, the sound of a police siren grew closer. Jonas had already called them. Reed's eyes widened in panic. "You called the police?" Daniel shrugged. "I didn't have to. The evidence called them. Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Share your thoughts below." Two officers entered the cafe, calm but alert. One of them looked at Daniel. "Someone reported potential fraud?" Jonas arrived right behind them, laptop bag over his shoulder. "That was me. I'm the cybersecurity consultant hired by Heart Tech to audit their systems. I've found irregularities." Reed tried to regain composure. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm a board member of Heart Tech, and this woman," he pointed at Evelyn, "has been acting erratically." "Sir, we're not here about her," the officer interrupted. "We're here about a report of document forgery and unauthorized access to company servers." The color drained from Reed's face. Jonas opened his laptop, turning it so the officers could see. "These are the server logs. Reed's account accessed financial files during non-business hours and made modifications. Then he presented those modified files as evidence against the CEO." The first twist. One of the officers looked at Daniel. "And you are?" "Someone who used to edit photos for a living," Daniel said simply. "I recognized a bad Photoshop job when I saw one." The officer studied the tablet screens still displayed on the cafe TV. Even without technical expertise, the jagged signature edges were visible once you knew to look. "Mr. Reed, we need you to come with us for questioning." "This is absurd," Reed shouted. "I'm being set up by a CEO who can't even walk properly and a cafe worker." The second officer stepped forward. "Sir, the evidence is digital. It has timestamps. Your account credentials. This isn't about anyone setting you up." Evelyn stood, leaning on her repaired crutch. For the first time that morning, she looked like a CEO. "Officer, I'd like to file a formal complaint. This man has been attempting to remove me from my position using forged documents. I believe he's also been embezzling funds and trying to frame me for it." Jonas nodded. "The audit shows several suspicious transactions, all authorized by Reed's credentials." Reed's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? The board will never support a cripple as CEO. They're already voting you out." The cafe went deadly silent. Lily gasped. Daniel's jaw tightened. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She took one step forward on her crutches, standing tall despite the pain. "The board can vote however they want, but they'll be voting based on truth now, not your lies." The twist deepens. One of the officers received a call. He listened, then looked at Reed with new interest. "We just got word that 3 other board members want to provide statements about financial irregularities. Apparently, once word got out about this confrontation," he gestured to the cafe, "people started coming forward." The live stream. Multiple customers had been streaming the entire confrontation. The video had already been shared thousands of times. Reed realized too late what had happened. His public humiliation of Evelyn had exposed him instead. "Mr. Reed, you need to come with us now." As the officers escorted Reed toward the door, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Evelyn. Even if I go down, you'll never be respected. Not with those crutches. Not with your weakness. Daniel moved before thinking. He didn't touch Reed, but he blocked his path, speaking quietly enough that only Reed could hear. My wife walked on crutches for 2 years while fighting cancer. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Strength isn't about how you walk. It's about refusing to stay down when someone tries to break you. Then louder, so the whole cafe could hear. And right now, Evelyn is standing. You're the one being walked out. The cafe erupted in applause. Reed was led away, still protesting, still threatening, but now powerless. Jonas approached Evelyn. I'm sorry I couldn't bring this to you directly. Reed blocked my access to you weeks ago. I had to work around him. Evelyn shook her head. You did the right thing. Thank you. She turned to Daniel. You knew. From the moment you saw that signature, you knew it was fake. I had a good idea, Daniel admitted, but I needed proof before I could say anything. That's why I asked for the file. You backed me up without even knowing me. I knew enough. Daniel glanced at Lily, who was now being hugged by several sympathetic customers. I knew what it's like when people judge you for things that don't matter, and I knew that signature was wrong. Evelyn's phone rang. The board, she answered. Miss Grant, we've just been informed of the situation. The vote has been suspended pending investigation. We owe you an apology. Evelyn closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Thank you. I'll be in the office within the hour. She hung up and looked down at herself. Messy hair, casual clothes, a broken crutch held together with tape and cloth. I can't go to the office like this. Lily tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Dad, we should help her. Daniel smiled. I think we should. The freeze moment comes together. 30 minutes later, Evelyn sat in the cafe's back room, her hair brushed, wearing a spare blazer the cafe owner had kept from her corporate days. Daniel had reinforced her crutch properly this time, using better materials from a hardware store 2 doors down. Lily presented Evelyn with a new drawing, Evelyn standing in the cafe surrounded by people, with Daniel beside her. Above them, the words in crayon, Heroes don't need capes. Evelyn held the drawing like it was made of glass. Can I keep this? It's for you, Lily said simply. The second major twist came when Jonas pulled Daniel aside. Hey, I don't know if you're looking for work, but Hardtech needs someone who can spot digital fraud. Someone with an eye for detail. Someone who's not afraid to speak up. He paused. You interested? Daniel blinked. I'm a cafe server. You're a graphic designer who happens to work at a cafe, Jonas corrected. There's a difference. And after today, everyone's going to know your name. Daniel looked at Lily, then at Evelyn, who was watching him with something like hope in her eyes. Let me think about it, he said, but they all knew what his answer would be. As Evelyn prepared to leave for her office, she paused at the door, the same door she'd walked through that morning. Broken and alone. She turned back to Daniel. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, Daniel said. You stood back up. That's all the thanks anyone needs. Evelyn smiled, a real smile, the first one that morning. This isn't over, you know. Reed has all eyes. This is going to get messy. Most true things do, Daniel replied. She nodded, then walked out of the cafe, head high, crutches steady. Daniel watched her go, Lily's hand in his. Dad? Lily asked. Is she going to be okay? Daniel thought about his wife, about all the mornings she'd struggled to stand, about all the times people had stared and judged and dismissed her. Yeah, he said quietly. I think she's going to be just fine. By noon, the cafe had become something of a landmark. News crews arrived, asking for interviews. Social media exploded with the hashtag #SaveTheRealCEO. The live stream from that morning had been viewed over 2 million times. But inside the cafe, something quieter and more important was happening. The middle-aged man who'd laughed when Evelyn first fell that morning approached Daniel. His face was red with shame. I need to apologize. I was one of the people who, when she fell, I didn't help, I just watched. Daniel didn't make it easy for him. Why? because I assumed she was looking for attention, that she was, I don't know, weak. He shook his head. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Another customer, a woman in her 50s, spoke up. I whispered to my friend when she walked in, said something cruel about her crutches. I'm ashamed of myself. One by one, people who'd been in the cafe that morning came forward. Not everyone. Some had left quietly, unwilling to face their own judgment. But enough people stayed, enough people spoke up, that the air in the cafe began to change. Lily, with the wisdom only children possess, said to the group, my mom used crutches. She said they weren't a sign she was broken. They were a sign she was still fighting. The woman who'd made the cruel comment started crying. Your mom was right. Thank you for teaching us what your dad couldn't say. The cafe owner, an elderly woman named Margaret, who'd run the place for 30 years, refused to let Daniel or Evelyn pay for anything. This cafe has always been about community, about people helping people. What happened here today was exactly what I dreamed of when I opened this place. She turned to address the gathered crowd. We all have our crutches, don't we? Some are visible, like Evelyn's. Some aren't. But we all need support sometimes. And we should never be ashamed of that. The room filled with the sound of agreement. Online, the tide had turned completely. Comments flooded in. Respect to the CEO who stood her ground. That single dad is a hero. Never judge someone by their crutches. You don't know their story. This is what real strength looks like. Heart Tech released an official statement by 2 p.m. After a thorough review, the board of directors has full confidence in CEO Evelyn Grant. We apologize for the distress caused by false accusations. Board member Reed Harrison has been removed from his position and is under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. We thank the individuals who brought the truth to light. Jonas called Daniel. You're trending. The entire tech community is talking about you. I don't want to trend, Daniel said. I just want to live my life. Too late, Jonas laughed. You're the guy who took down a corrupt board member with photo editing skills. That's legend status. When Evelyn returned to the cafe that evening, she looked different. Still tired, still leaning on crutches, but there was something lighter about her. She found Daniel and Lily at their usual corner table. I wanted to thank you, she said, sitting down. Properly. You already did, Daniel started, but Evelyn held up a hand. Done. No, I didn't. What you did today, you didn't just save my job. You reminded me why I wanted this job in the first place. She looked around the cafe. Power isn't about boardrooms and expensive suits. It's about standing up when everyone expects you to fall. She pulled out an envelope. This is a formal offer, head of digital security and authenticity, part-time, flexible hours, salary that will let you work fewer shifts here and spend more time with Lily. Daniel stared at the envelope. I'm not qualified for that. You spotted fraud that my entire security team missed. You're more qualified than anyone. Evelyn smiled. Plus, Jonas vouched for you, and after today I trust Jonas with my life. Lily tugged Daniel's sleeve. Dad, I want people to see how amazing you are. Daniel looked at his daughter, at the hope in her eyes, at the chance to step out of the shadow of grief and into something new. Can I think about it overnight? Take all the time you need, Evelyn said, but they both knew he'd already decided. I never thought a quiet Sunday morning would become the day I stood up to a boardroom. My name is Daniel Hale, single father, cafe server, former graphic designer, and apparently, according to the internet, the hero who saved a CEO. But I'm not a hero, I'm just someone who couldn't stay silent anymore. 4 years ago, I watched my wife struggle with crutches. I watched people stare, whisper, judge. I watched her shoulders hunch under the weight of their pity and dismissal, and I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting every battle, that we should just ignore them, But the truth is, I was afraid of making a scene, afraid of making things worse. When my wife died, one of my biggest regrets was that I didn't defend her more fiercely, that I let people diminish her when she was already fighting so hard just to live. When I heard those words from Evelyn, please don't laugh at my crutches, I heard my wife's voice. And I knew that this time I couldn't be silent. I didn't plan to become some viral story. I just planned to help someone who was falling. But life has a way of turning small moments into something bigger. I took the job at Tech, part-time, just enough to build a better life for Lily without sacrificing our time together. Evelyn and I became unlikely friends. She started coming to the cafe every Sunday morning, not as a CEO, but just as someone who needed a quiet place to be human. Lily drew pictures for both of us. Pictures of people on crutches with wings, pictures of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. One Sunday, about a month after everything happened, Evelyn brought something with her, a framed photo. It was a screenshot from the live stream that morning. The moment where I stood between her and Reed. The moment where Lily held the drawing. The moment where everything changed. "I want you to have this," Evelyn said, as a reminder that kindness is never wasted. I looked at the photo, at the man I'd become in that moment. Not perfect, not fearless, just present. "Thank you," I said, "for giving me a second chance." A second chance at what? At being the person my wife believed I was. Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Not romantic, just human, just connected. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of you?" I felt tears prick my eyes. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." That evening, the three of us walked out of the cafe together. Lily in the middle, holding my hand on one side and carrying Evelyn's spare crutch on the other, connecting two worlds, fragile and strong, wounded and healing. I learned something important that day. Strength isn't about never falling down. It's about who you become when you choose to stand back up. And sometimes, the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes they're the ones you almost walk past. The ones society told you were weak, invisible, unimportant. My wife once told me that her crutches weren't a sign of weakness. They were a sign she refused to stop moving forward. Evelyn's crutches tell the same story, and in some ways, so do mine. They're just invisible. We all have something we lean on, something that helps us stand. The question is, will we let others mock us for it, or will we own it with pride? I chose pride, finally, and it changed everything. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.